It's been 6 months since the death of Mahsa Amini, the Iranian woman whose killing at the hands of the morality police sparked one of Iran's largest anti-regime movements ever. The notorious security force arrested Amini for refusing to wear her headscarf correctly, and abolishing that law is just one of the protest movement's demands. France 24's chief foreign editor Rob Parsons is with us now in the studio to discuss what's changed since the start of these protests. Rob, have the demonstrations moved the needle at all in Iran?
Oh, I think there's no question about that. They really have. But how far have they gone, and what have they achieved? I suppose. I mean, you could say not that much if you consider that. Towards the end of last year, there was a lot of speculation about whether or not the regime would even survive. Quite clearly, the regime has survived. But late last year, there were demonstrations, there were massive funerals right across the country, from the Caspian Sea in the north down to the Persian Gulf in the south, Kurdistan in the west, right down to the southeastern province of Balochistan with Pakistan, and big cities like Isfahan and Tehran everywhere. It seemed like anything was possible. And yet the regime has managed to survive. It's clamped down. It's been very, very tough. Thousands of arrests. People have been sentenced to death. Some have been executed already. But have they managed to completely crush the movement? I think not. I think there has been a real change. Already, even within the regime, people are talking about the need to take a softer approach, that perhaps the law on hijabs, which means any woman over the age, or any female over the age of 9 has to wear a hijab, needs to be softened. The demonstrations have eased up over the winter months, but perhaps with the arrival of spring, and already we've seen some demonstrations on Women's Day on March the 8th, perhaps they're going to pick up again. And within society at large, I think a big change has happened, that people are much more conscious of their civil rights. I'm talking about women in particular, of course. And women are becoming much bolder, despite the fact that it is still illegal to wear a hijab, despite the fact that the Supreme Leader keeps making very strong statements about it. Women en masse now are beginning to walk around, not just big cities like Tehran, but provincial cities as well, without an hijab. So clearly something is happening. Where's it going to go next, I think, is the big question now.
Right. So sometimes it feels like there's a bit of a standoff going on, because the regime will become more brutal, but that doesn't stop the protesters. So what are the options going forward?
Yeah, I think that the regime has a bit of a dilemma going forward here about how it should approach the problem. Because they've seen that simply by clamping down runs the risk of making things worse. That's what they did last year. Mahsa Amini died in police detention, and that led ultimately to the massive protests that we saw at the end of last year, and perhaps we'll see again this year if something like that should be repeated. So I think that has to be at the back of their minds, which is why within the establishment itself, people are already beginning to say, look, maybe this is not in the best interests in the long-term survival of the Islamic State in Iran. Perhaps we need a different approach. But the other side of the coin from the point of view of the regime is, if we make concessions, is that just the beginning of a slippery slope? Does that way lead to the end of the regime as well? And I think a background to all that is that economically, Iran is doing so badly as well. It's not just that social unrest. There's economic unrest simmering as well. The regime finds itself in a very, very difficult place with no easy answers.
Rob Parsons, France 24's chief foreign editor, thank you for helping us understand this.